Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Paint Desk Ramblings. Tonight's episode will be about the background material of the Ninth Age and how it is written, the point of view, so to speak. So today it is written in an in-world point of view, where everything is presented as if it was written by someone in the world, who's actually part of the world, as opposed to some all-knowing god writing text about the world, which is quite common. So I've seen this pop up in discussions now and then in the past, with people not really liking this method, some other people defending it, and yeah, things like that. So I thought I should discuss it a little bit. Personally, I'm a fan of it, but I will bring up some other views and discuss it a bit, as usual. Before we get into that, we have the spotlight though, the hobby spotlight. So tonight I'm working on a Grot Warboss by Games Workshop, an older model. It's not available on their site anymore. I don't think it's produced anymore, but I will link to a similar model instead. I'm painting it up to use as a Cave Goblin King for my Orcs and Goblins army, and I will bring him to a tournament next weekend. He's been in my drawer for ages, but I haven't really have had any use of him until now. So I'm painting him up. He will actually be my general in this tournament. My other characters have mounts and are running around and are quite squishy, so I wanted a cheap little general to put in a bunker to keep safe behind my lines. But didn't have a model for it, so I'm painting one up now. I have also converted him a little bit, added a bow to his back to better represent what he's using in the game. So that's the hobby spotlight. On to the news. First we have Battle Bits, which is the Kickstarter I mentioned last time. They have launched and they have been funded in just 16 hours, so that's cool. If you don't remember, they are making conversion parts for Ratmen, so suitable for the Vermin Swarm in the Ninth Age. They have 2 kits. I will probably back them and to get 2 of each myself. I haven't gotten around to it yet because I'm lazy, but I'm sure I'll get there soon. I also wanted to mention that I finished painting the Imperial Ranger that I worked on last time, and he's been entered into the Fight for Avras, the campaign that's running on the site. He was a really wonderful miniature to paint. If you like old school miniatures, I can really recommend Warmonger. It was a very nice sculpt, as have the other Warmonger miniatures been that I've painted. So I can recommend them. Back to Battle Bits. No, I think I was finished with those. I'll include a link to them down below if you want to go and check them out and maybe back them. The next item is a new release by the project, the Flux card supplement was released just a few days ago, and it contains 5 new sets of Flux cards that you can use in your games to spice things up and get some variation. I really like the idea of this. I've long thought that the design of the magic phase in the Ninth Age is really good, with the one exception that the cards that you use are too similar. I feel that overall you don't really care about which card will be next. You will always get 1 or 2 spells, maybe 3 if you're lucky, through anyway. So it doesn't really matter which card you get. You get a bit happy when you draw number 5 and maybe sad when you draw number 1 or 2, but it's not that big a deal. You usually get at least 1 spell through. So I welcome this as a way to make that card draw really matter. Yes. Especially I think that the Dark Gods cards are interesting. It's a set of 8 cards, as is every other set, so 1 for each of the 7 and 1 for Father Chaos. And each of the card gives you an option to yield to that god. Then you get a bonus, but you also suffer some negative consequences. And I think that's really fluffy, and I also think that it can make for some very interesting choices in the game, which is always nice. So check those out if you're interested in spicing up your games a bit. I know I will. Try to find a way to use them in my games. Unfortunately, I don't play that much outside of tournaments, and on those occasions it might be a bit hard to convince my opponent to use them. But maybe I should try, actually. We'll see. Check those out at least. Last piece of news item we have is an intercepted letter about the Dread Elves. It was also released by the project. So it's their way of, their fluffy little way of telling us that the work has started on the next legendary army book, which is the Dread Elves, or next after Infernal Dwarfs. So the Dread Elves is now in stage 1, the concept phase, which I guess means that the Infernal Dwarfs are in stage 2 at least. So that's nice to hear. I really look forward to their next release and seeing how it has changed with their new design method. So yeah, check that out if you're interested in Dread Elves. On to the main topic. The fluff point of view for the Ninth Age. So as I said in the start, everything, all the official background material of the Ninth Age is is presented as an in-world source through narrators who actually live in the world and write about the world around them. Because of this, you get a lot of diaries and notes and letters from people in the world that we for some reason get access to, and we can read and try and understand the world that we engage in. This method of presenting fluff has received some negative feedback, I'd say. Some people don't really like it. They want a more all-knowing type of text for at least some of the background, or maybe even the majority, keeping these in-world sources as some additional flavor text perhaps, but they want the majority of the fluff to be presented by someone all-knowing. And the argument for this is that it would help them understand their faction better, because when it's presented by someone in the world, the information gets tainted by the person's bias, and you can't rely on it. It's unreliable narrators, and well, sometimes the bias is not even it's only just caused because the person writing is just not knowledgeable on the subject. I think this mostly became an issue with the second book they released, The Silver Elves. People seem to enjoy it more in the first book, The Undying Dynasties. And I think that has to do with the fact that the Undying Dynasties book, the main narrator in that book, is Beatrix von Üblingen, I think her name is. She's an archaeologist, so a professional who travels through Naptash and writes about the things she encountered there, the Undying Dynasties. And since she's a professional, she should know what she's talking about. So you can trust her fairly well in what she is writing, and through that you get a pretty good understanding of the faction. The second book, The Sylvan Elves, has the main narrator is Thomas the Bard, who was captured by the Sylvan Elves, and he has written about them based on his observations from the cage, basically. And people feel that this makes it highly unreliable because he's just a bard. He doesn't know what he's talking about, basically. And I can see that argument. You don't really get a good understanding, perhaps, of the faction through him. However, I don't think that's necessarily a problem with unreliable narrators. Or at least it can be compensated by choosing other narrators, and mainly using more narrators. Because if you have several sources for each thing, you can start getting a pretty good idea about what they're talking about, same as the real world. The problem, though, is that we don't have that many sources at the moment, and that leads us to the second problem that people have with this method, and that is that it is slow. And again, I can see the argument. The background team, when writing the background, they sort of have to do a double work, because they decide on everything, they create a world and how it's supposed to be, and then they have people write the texts that are presented to us, the community, based on those descriptions of the world, instead of just making the descriptions public, which they could. They have an internal wiki that contains this all-knowing knowledge of the world, basically. But they choose not to publish it, to some people's dismay. And yeah, I can see the argument. This is a slower method of presenting things. But I think a big part of the problem is really that people have a bit too high expectations. Not that the background team isn't good enough, that the stuff they are producing isn't up to snuff, because I think that the background they are releasing is really good. But I think the people are expecting to be immediately invested and interested in this whole background without putting any effort in, because I think people are prone to forget that they are not kids anymore. A lot of people got into this hobby when they were quite young, and they want to experience that same feeling they had from getting into the hobby at that age now again. But they are different people. You experience things differently as you age, and I think people are ignorant of that, perhaps. But it's I don't know how big of a problem it is. I think to some degree at least people could find that they really quite like this new world if they just took the time to read a bit about the fluff, read what's available, and all of that. Not everyone. Some people won't like it. It is, after all, background stuff. If you like it, it's subjective. Not everyone will like it. It's that simple. But to a large degree, I think it's a problem of people not giving it a try, at least. But that is not an argument to keep things as they are. I know that. Because if they started releasing all-knowing texts about the world, I'm sure they could produce things faster, and maybe that would help get people interested. Still, I don't want that. One of the big reasons for this is that I think that this method of presenting background is rather unique, at least to this scale. I know that there is literature that is written this way. Dracula, for instance, is written in an in-world perspective. All the texts in that book are written by people who encounter Dracula and try to fight him and such. So it's the same way, and I think that it's a good book. I really like it, and I think a big reason for that is the way it is written. It makes it special. In the same way, I feel that part of what makes Ninth Age special is this way of writing. Because, to be honest, the background itself is not that original, and it's not meant to be original. It's meant to be a fairly generic fantasy world where everything fits, and it's also heavily inspired by the real world. So it's nothing groundbreaking really, but by using this unconventional method of presenting the background, you get something special anyway. and I think that can be a way to attract players, just because of this different way of writing. I know some of my friends who aren't into wargaming have been a bit interested in the Fluff of 9th Age just because of this way it is written. So for that reason I think it can be worth holding on to. There are also other advantages. Such as the it makes it easier for the writers. You don't have to be as careful when writing to not counteract something already presented, because it's unreliable narrators. Maybe one of the people writing doesn't know what they're talking about. So it's a bit too cheap, maybe, to just be able to dismiss problems in the background like that, but still it works, I think. I even think they are actually purposefully using this a bit, creating a bit conflicting theories and such in the world. In the ninth scroll for the Sylvan Elves, there's a text about the forest and the tree spirit that lives in it, and basically it's two scientists who argue about how it really is, if the tree spirits are the ancient elves who have merged with the wood, become one with the wood, or if they are supernal beings that long ago were infused to trees and still live on in the mortal realm. So you already have two conflicting theories, and you can expand on that conflict a bit by introducing more sources supporting either one or the other, and maybe eventually you can condense it down to something that's the truth. But it's not really necessary to know that, I think. So I think it's quite neat to have this little conflict instead. It adds to the mysterious nature of the tree spirits, I think. Another advantage is the fact that if you don't like the background fluff of anything, if you don't like it for the Fallen, in the Wars of the Dark Gods or whatever, you can simply disregard it. You feel that this narrator is unreliable, he doesn't know what he's talking about. In reality, this is the way it is. So that gives you a lot of freedom to come up with your own stuff without conflicting with the already existing stuff, which is something I like. Yeah. Well, I said this was going to be a fairly short episode, and I think I can fulfill that promise at least, because I don't think I have that much more to say on this. I like this way of writing. I feel that it is unique, and it makes for an interesting way of exploring the world. Maybe it requires a bit more effort from the readers, but I think it's worth it just because it makes it unique. So those are my thoughts. on the paint desk, I've got a pretty good way on the goblin. As you saw in the pictures I posted before, he was already started on at the beginning of this show. I had painted the steel, a rusted steel, and I had painted the base coat of his clothing. So now I've finished his clothing, I finished his skin, and I worked a bit on his bow too, and also finished the bone pieces. So pretty good progress, I think. But I guess that will do it. I will see you on the next one. Cheers.